Hi everybody, and welcome to week 3 of ocTEL. And my name is Caroline Greaves, I'm Alt Events Manager. It's just to say quickly that if you have any problems with your audio during the session, please first check Tools, Audio and Audio Setup Wizard. And if you are still having problems, post in the chat window and I'll try and help. At the moment your audio permissions are disabled, so you can't turn your mic on. So please post any questions or comments in the chat. As the session goes on, we might put that back on so that you can talk directly to Cable. I'm really looking forward to this session. I'm going to hand over now to the lead tutor for the week, James Kerr, to introduce Cable. Have a good session.
Thank you, Carolyn. I'd like to welcome everybody to the week 3 webinar. As you know, this week we're examining materials and platforms for learning technology, and we've been encouraging everyone to explore tools and resources. ocTEL is about learning, exploring, and sharing. Now this week got started a little bit slow, but we're now gaining speed. One of the concepts that we want to present and explore this week is the concept of openness, open educational resources, open tools, and the general concept of universal access to research, education, and culture. To that end, we invited Cable Green, the Director of Global Learning from the Creative Commons, to come speak with us and answer questions about open licensing and the Creative Commons licenses. And he graciously agreed. So, without further delay, Cable Green.
Well, thanks, James, and hi, everybody. So we could go about this several ways. We've got an hour, and rather than me just sitting here speaking at you with a bunch of slides, which is not my preferred method of communication or interaction, I thought it would be more useful if I maybe gave some brief overviews about what Open Educational Resources is about, what's happening, what some of the highlights are to set the stage, and then we can really engage in a conversation. So get your questions ready. I'll be watching the chat. We'll open up the mics so everyone can ask questions as well. But let's have a conversation. This isn't just for this is also for the moderators, for my friends James, Caroline, and Martin. I'd ask them to throw in the hard questions and their own expertise as well. They too are experts in OER and have a lot to say. So let me first start by saying thank you. And my name is Cable Green. I lead education at Creative Commons. Creative Commons, I just dropped the link there in the chat window. We're a nonprofit global organization that provides open copyright licenses and public domain tools to make it easy and simple and legal to share on the web and off the web, for that matter. And the idea is that in every country in the world, there's this thing called copyright law. And copyright law protects the owner, the author of the work for a period of time before that work goes into the public domain. And that's a good thing. It's a good thing for authors to have their rights protected, for artists and others who might want to create something and maybe profit from it, or might want to license it to someone. There's nothing wrong with that. The question that Creative Commons sought to answer is, what if I'm an author, what if I'm an owner of a piece of content, of a movie, of music, a textbook, a course, a simulation, maybe something we use in education, maybe a data set that I'm using to study the cure for cancer. Maybe it's an archive of metadata from my public library in my capital city. Maybe it's all of the government data that's coming out about where the potholes are on the freeway. It could be anything that's traditionally copyrighted. What if I want to share that information, that knowledge, those artifacts with the world at no cost and under the terms and conditions that I choose? And that's Creative Commons licenses. And let me give you a direct link to the licenses. And I'll just be dropping links throughout our talk here. So there's a direct link to the licenses. If you click on that and scroll down to the bottom, you'll see that there are one of 6 different open copyright licenses. And essentially, they allow the rest of the world to do various things with your work. And we can get into the details of the licenses later if you're interested. But in a nutshell, if you use my work, you have to give me credit. It's called attribution. That's required on all of the licenses. The other three conditions are optional. One is no derivatives. That means you can't make changes to my work. In education, especially, we try to stay away from that one because, of course, one educator is going to want to modify and change what another educator does. And so we try to stay away from the no derivatives licenses best we can in education. Another option is called non-commercial. That essentially means you may not make primary commercial use of my work. So you can't take my open textbook that I shared with you, put it on the web and charge 35 pounds for it. That would be against the law. And then the third option is called Sharealike. And Sharealike means if you take my work and you modify it, you change it, you make a derivative work, that changed piece, that derivative work that you made from my original must be licensed under the same terms that I licensed my work under. So Wikipedia uses that license. They use an attribution Sharealike license. So without getting too detailed into the licenses, the big point of Creative Commons is keep your copyright, keep your ownership, your authorship. Don't give that up. Don't give up your rights. And if you want to share some freedoms, some permissions with the public, then you can add a Creative Commons license to your copyrighted work without giving up your copyright, and you're sharing under the terms and conditions that you choose. And the best part is it's free. You don't need a lawyer to write custom contracts for you, and these licenses are recognized around the world as being legal, and so when people see something under a Creative Commons license, they know that they've got the legal rights to use it, and they know specifically what their rights are because the licenses make that easy to understand. So that in a nutshell is Creative Commons. We're a global organization. We have teams in 75 countries around the world. I work at Creative Commons headquarters, and as I said, run the education efforts there. But we also have teams in science, legal, policy, culture, which would include music and the arts. We've got a sector called GLAM, galleries, libraries, archives, and museums, which also tends to be part of our work in culture. And then we've got a technology team that works on this as well. So why does that matter? Big deal. Why do we need Creative Commons? Well, back to open educational resources. Roughly a decade ago, maybe 15 years ago for some of us, we started to work with computers in education. And what we built, what we produced was digital and still is digital. And we started to use programs like this, like Blackboard Collaborate and other communication ways and channels on the net and tools to not only share communication, but actually to share educational resources. And what we realized, especially with the advent of cloud computing and the falling cost of computers and disk space, was that when we created something that was digital, it cost almost nothing to store that digital thing, to make copies of it, and to distribute it around the world on this cool thing we call the internet. And so, again, the cost of storage, distribution, and replication essentially have fallen to zero. It's not quite zero, but it's really, really close to zero. And because we could do that, we decided that that would be worth thinking about in terms of what are the possibilities around education. So if you think about, if you produce a really high quality textbook or a really great course or really great simulation or test bank or interactive assessment or whatever it might be for education, and yes, it's going to cost a lot of money to build it, and it'll cost a significant amount of money to maintain that resource and certainly to provide instruction around it and student support, etc. But the object itself, we don't have to keep paying for it over and over and over, because once it's digital, we can share it for the marginal cost of zero. And that was a very interesting moment in the world of education, because we've never before in history been able to say that. It used to be that where's some paper? Let me find some paper. Used to be that we use this stuff, right? Paper. We still do. To print books or monographs or other resources for learning. And to make a copy of a book is expensive. It costs a fair bit of money. And then to ship copies of that book all around the world is even more expensive. And so the idea of sharing educational resources universally was really a laughable notion prior to things being digital and prior to the internet. So if you take those two things together, things being digital, the internet, plus Creative Commons licensing, now we live in a world where somebody can build a digital education resource, they can put a Creative Commons license on it, and they can share it not only technically at the marginal cost of zero, but they can share it legally at the cost of zero as well. And now we're in a very interesting space because somebody in the UK could create a textbook and somebody in Saudi Arabia could pick up that book and modify chapter 2, and then somebody in Slovenia could take that and they could modify it further and maybe translate it into a different language, and then someone in Barcelona can pick it up, but you get the idea. So therein is the world that we live in. Maybe one quick definition of OER, and then I'll stop and we'll start talking. For something to be an open educational resource, and there are many definitions out there, but they all contain the same structure. So for something to be an OER, it must have two characteristics. One, it must be freely available, meaning it's available at no cost or gratis. Second, you must have the legal rights to do what David Wiley calls the 5 R's. So you must legally be able to reuse it, revise, remix, redistribute, and retain. So reuse is I'm going to take I'll take Martin's open textbook that he was so kind to share with me, and I'm just going to use it as it is. That's a reuse. Revise is I'm going to take Martin's textbook and modify it. I don't like his chapter 2, I'm going to take it out, I'm going to rewrite my own chapter 2. I don't like the order of it, I'm going to move that around. That's a revision. A remix is when I take Martin's book and I take a little bit of Martin's book and a little bit of that Open University, Open Learn course, and oh look, I just found a great resource over in Joram, I'm going to take a piece of that. Oh, there's a nice part of that physics course at MIT and maybe this Khan Academy video. And I'm going to mix it all together into something new. That's a remix. Redistribute is I'm going to take that revision or that remix that I created and I'm going to share it with everybody else. And retain means I'm going to keep a copy. You can't take a copy away from me. I get to keep it forever. And so, oh, thanks, whoever put that up. So one is it must be free, and two, you must have the legal rights to do those 5 R's. And if you don't, so if you say went to Coursera, you're all familiar with MOOCs, or you went to Future Learn or one of these MOOCs, and if it says on the MOOC, all rights reserved copyright, it might be free, and free's good. But if I was at the University of Leicester and I started downloading courses and revising and remixing and reusing, and in fact I'm violating copyright law and I could be sued, well, A, I don't want to be sued, and B, that's not an OER. So that's a good litmus test. Is if I'm doing the 5 R's on something and I'm potentially violating the law and could be sued in a court of law, then that's not OER. You must have all of those legal rights. So let me stop there, and that's maybe a good opening. We can certainly lots more we can dive into. We can talk more about open access publishing, open textbooks, open policies. Governments and foundations are starting to change their rules on money such that publicly funded resources are openly licensed. But let me come back here to the questions first, and we'll dig in. Let's see here. Martin says, I wonder what the general awareness of CC license is. Okay, good question. Moria says, have we gotten to the badge word yet? No, but we'll talk about badges. Good question. So I'll put that on the list here. Maybe somebody could type it up on the board so we don't forget. Okay, different types of CC. Maybe we took a swing at that. we'll come back to badges. Martin says, different licenses usually make me think if I release this CC BY, can I use it CC BY SA? Martin, unpick IP licenses. So Martin, you want to hop on the mic and say more what you mean about that?
Yeah, it's I'm producing an OER, and I know I want to release it as CC BY. I always, and obviously there are different licensing types, and I always have in my head, right, what can I use within this, CC BY thing that I want to release? What licenses can I use in that? And I think it generally leaves me pondering it a bit. I know that there are resources like the Web2 Rights where I can go to and get clarification on that. I was just wondering if you had any other sources that are good for just working out. I suppose the license chooser itself on the Creative Commons site is a good starting place for that sort of thing.
So I just dropped some text in the chat window. What you want to do if you are creating a new work, or maybe it's a new collection of works, is decide what the predominant license is in that collection. So for example, let's say Martin's creating a new course, and everything that he builds will be under a CC BY license, as he said, or maybe it's a textbook he's building. But he, as he said, he wants to take parts and he wants to reuse other people's OER that may have different licenses on it. And so one of the things that you are able to do with Creative Commons licenses is essentially to create a collection. So I'll grab a shape tool here. Here we go. So I'm just drawing these little circles here. So imagine this is Martin's course. And this really big circle here is what Martin is producing. And then let me get a tool here. I'm going to draw a line around. So imagine that's a complete line all the way around. And we'll call this, let me get a tool here. We'll call this Martin's textbook on 21st century online learning. Okay. We'll move that around. There we go. Okay, so imagine that this big piece of content on the bottom here is what Martin has produced, and that's yeah, it does look like a mass cell, and that's CC BY. So everything Martin builds is CC BY, and that's the predominant work. He's built 60–70% of the book. But let's say Martin really likes this piece of. Let me grab an arrow here. He really likes this piece of content from MIT OpenCourseWare up here, and then he likes this other piece of content. Then he likes this other piece of content over here from the Open University, and this has got a BY NCSA license on it. And he likes this article over here, and it's a Wikipedia article, and it's under BY SA. As long as Martin properly marks these things and they're discrete objects inside of his work, he can have different licensed works inside his work, and so that's usually referred to as a collection. Much of the OpenCourseWare around the world are in fact collections just like this, where people have taken a little bit from here and a little bit from over there. And so what Martin would do, let me grab a text tool again here, is he would say, you know, this Wikipedia article, and he would list what the title and the author, who the title and the author are, and the link to the article. But he would also say this is under a CC BY SA license. And then this piece over here, he would say it came from OpenLearn at the Open University, and it's got a BY NCSA license on it. And he'd list the title and the author, and he would link to that work. And that's fine for him to do. And then what Martin would do on the bottom of his footer is he would say, unless otherwise noted, everything in this course is under a CC BY 4.0 international license. if that's the license that he chose. And that way, all of his work, he doesn't have to mark it with CC BY because it's already marked by the broad marking. And then when he said, unless otherwise noted, what he gave himself was the flexibility to otherwise note works that are not CC BY. So that's what he's done. He said this Wikipedia article is by SA, etc. Now, the Sharealike clause in, say, the OpenLearn work or the Wikipedia work, that clause is triggered if Martin makes a derivative work of the article itself in Wikipedia. So if he started with the Wikipedia article and then changed that Wikipedia article, his change is required to be by SA. But if he brings that Wikipedia article in, and he's bringing in the whole article or a part of the article into his larger work, his course or his textbook, he's not changing the article anymore, then he can do what I just drew. Martin, is that helpful?
Yeah, and perhaps just to bring one more dimension into this and hopefully not overcomplicate it. One of the license types is non-commercial. So how would that fit into your diagram there?
Yeah, that's a great question. So let's say, again, Martin has his textbook on 21st century online learning. If Martin intends to make no commercial use of this work, he just wants to share it and share it freely, then that non-commercial component is fine, right? Martin can use it. Martin can use it with his students. Martin can give it away, and the non-commercial clause is not violated. If Martin wants to take this book and sell it to somebody, then yes, that would violate the non-commercial clause. And what he would have to do at that point is remove any component of this course that had an NC license on it. Another question that comes up a lot is, what if Martin's what if he's a professor at Cambridge? We just promoted Martin. So Martin's a professor at Cambridge, and he takes this book that he's put together and he gives it to the bookstore at Cambridge, and he says, please print this for me and make it available to my students. And the bookstore says, happy to do that. The print cost for your book will be about £5.50, and we'll sell it to the students. And so Martin's question to the bookstore is there a profit in that, or is that simply cost recovery? If it's cost recovery, then it's not violating the non-commercial clause because the primary use is not for making a profit. It's not for commercial use. If it is making a profit, then it would be violating the NC clause. So good rule of thumb is if you're selling the work for commercial purposes to make a profit, then yes, you're violating the NC clause. But if it's even if you're printing it and selling those printed copies, that's okay to do as long as it's only cost recovery. So the bookstore could not be making a profit on that book. Martin, did we cover that, or do you want to dive a little deeper?
Nope, that's great for me.
All right, let's look at the questions here. So is it an oxymoron to apply CC rights to your blog article? Not at all. So your blog is yours. You are the copyright holder of your blog. And even though you're making your blog freely available on the internet, it's still all rights reserved copyright, meaning people can read it. You're sharing it on the web, and they certainly can link to it without violating copyright. But if they went into your to your blog and they highlighted the text and copied the text and put it on their blog, that might be protected under fair dealing or fair use rights, but it might not. It would depend on the circumstance. What if you had a nice image on your blog that you took the picture, so you're the copyright holder of that image, and somebody wants to take that image and use it in a commercial textbook, right? So, well, they couldn't. It's all rights reserved copyright. They would need your permission to do so. And so many people, in fact, do put a Creative Commons license on their blog, and people who want to share their images and use different photo sharing sites, Flickr being one of the big ones, they actually will add CC licenses to their works. And so this is a really great thing for us all to think about is, what do we produce? What do we build as educators, and as human beings, that we might want to share some rights with others so that they can do the 5 R's, right? So they can take our work and use it and change it and modify it to meet their needs. And so you can, on platforms on the web like Blackboard, if I'm using Blackboard Collaborate here, I don't know what you use for a learning management system, but most of the learning management systems out there allow you to add a CC license to your work. If you upload a video to YouTube, you can add a CC BY license to your work on YouTube, which not only marks it as CC BY, but it also puts your video into a separate category in YouTube of videos that can be remixed using YouTube's video remix tool, which is kind of cool, if that's your intent. Yes, CC Flickr has options where you can go into your Flickr settings, and you can tell Flickr from now on, when I upload images, any image, I want it under this Creative Commons license. And you can always go back and change that or relicense works later, but you can set that as a default. Let me pause and turn over to our moderators here. I'm sure that they saw some questions that I missed, or they might want to ask some questions themselves. So James, Caroline, Martin?
Thank you, Cable. We had a couple of questions come through in the chat. I've been trying to capture them as they scroll by. There was a question, are there Creative Commons types that you can't mix? Can video designs and processes also be licensed with Creative Commons?
Yeah, so really good question. So yes, there are CC licenses that cannot be remixed with each other. So you saw the example we did with Martin's textbook, the big blob paramecium thing at the bottom of the screen. You can take any CC license and do that, what I just described. You can put together a collection of works. They're really these separate works inside a larger work. And if you properly mark them and they kind of sit by themselves, you can do that. But what if I'm taking a whole bunch of works and I'm really throwing them in to the mix, and I'm creating a course out of it, and it becomes very difficult to see where one work started and where the other one ended, because I've just mixed them so tightly that it really is a remix and it's a new work. And so what licenses are incompatible? So first, the no derivatives licenses don't allow those works to be modified, to be changed. And so you can't take, for example, a BY ND license or an NC ND license and start remixing it with something else, because it's no derivatives. It says you may not change me. So those licenses are out. And so it's worth pointing out that those 2 licenses are not OER compatible licenses, because remember the definition we had with OER. You must be able to change it, modify it, use it how you want to. The no derivatives license violates those conditions. So if you want to use OER, or you want your work to be OER, don't put a Creative Commons no derivative license on your work. So what about Sharealike? Sharealike's really the other one that you have to be careful with. Sharealike says if you change me, if I'm a Sharealike thing, and you modify me, that modification you made must be under the same license. So you can't take a BY SA work, like a Wikipedia article, and a BY NC SA work, like an MIT OpenCourseWare course, and mash them together and remix them in a way that they're really intertwined. And the reason is that both Sharealike licenses demand that their terms be the terms on the resulting remixed work, if that makes sense. So I'm taking work A and work B, and both works want to have the same license when work C is created. And you can't do that because they're different licenses. One's BY SA and one's BY NC SA. And so those are just a couple examples where you have to be careful about what works you're mixing together. And there are tools out there that tell you, what you're allowed to do, and I'll share a couple of those in the links. But this is a really important point for us as educators. So knowing this and knowing that there are different restrictions on different Creative Commons licenses, what do we want to do when we're licensing our work for the rest of the world. So you heard Martin say when he creates works, he uses a CC BY license. And not to put words in his mouth, but I'll try. My guess is the reason Martin uses a CC BY license is probably several reasons, but the big one is that Martin realizes that all this remix stuff can get kind of complicated if you're using more restrictive Creative Commons licenses. And Martin has said to himself, you know, if I'm going to share, then I really want to maximize the number of people and the types of reuse that can happen around the world. And I want to extend to others as many degrees of freedom as I can. I want to give as much flexibility as I can to others. And so he goes with an attribution license. He knows he's going to get credit. People are going to have to link back to him. They're going to have to list his name, the title of the work. So that's all good. And he's asked himself the other questions. Do I care if somebody makes commercial use of my work? Martin says, I don't really care because, gosh, if somebody tries to sell my work, they're going to have to give me attribution and link back to me anyway. And you'd have to be a pretty stupid consumer to pay for something over here when you can get it from me at no cost. And so he's not too worried about that. And then he asked himself about Sharealike. And he said, Sharealike, do I really care if the derivative works that somebody makes off my work are under the same license? Nah, I don't care that much. I'm okay with people making derivative works. What I'd really like to know is where those are and what people are doing, and I'd like to connect with those people and have a community around this content so I can learn and talk with them. And then he asked himself the no derivatives option, and he said, you know, do I want to lock this down? Do I think this work is as good as it could ever be? Am I the smartest person on this topic? And he probably said, no, you know, content can always be made better. And I'm an educator, and I'm willing to let other people revise and remix my work, and hopefully they'll come up with something better than I did. And so he kind of went through that process in his head and ended up with a CC BY license. Martin, did I get that about right? How's my guessing?
It was pretty good. there is, yeah, I'm just after the credit at the end of the day. There is one slight variation to all my work. I'm quite happy to be CC BY, but a friend of mine, Alec Caruso, he'd taken a video of his son learning to ride a bike, and he licensed that video as CC BY non-commercial. And a little while later, Nokia saw the video and they wanted to use it in an advert. And had that been CC BY, his video of his son riding a bike could have been used by Nokia, but because he had the non-commercial aspect to it, they couldn't without asking him first. So for me, the distinction is my professional work, you can have it for free, but personal family pictures, that sort of thing, there's usually an NC clause on that.
Yeah, and that's a really, I like that story. That's a great example of Creative Commons has a whole suite of licenses for just this reason, and at different times in different parts of your life with different works, you may choose different licenses for different reasons, and that's perfectly okay. Let me come back to Vicky's question. Looks like she's got one people are excited about here. Vicky says, what counts as non-commercial? If we use NC licensed OERs to create a resource to help people design distance learning courses that will have an income for the university, does that count as non-commercial or not? Great question, Vicky. So if we use NC licensed OERs to create a resource, okay, so you're creating a resource, you're creating a course, a book, a professional development activity, something like that, to help people design distance learning courses. And so they'll have an income for the university. Okay. So, Vicki, there's several options here. One would be, are these students of the university and the university is charging tuition, et cetera? And if the answer to that was yes, then even if it's NC licensed content, you're always allowed to use NC licensed content in a course, even if the university is charging tuition, because as long as you're not selling the content. So when you charge tuition, you're not really selling the content in the course, What you're selling is access to the facilities. You're selling access mostly to the faculty, to the student services. You're paying for, you know, somebody to cut the grass and parking and all sorts of stuff. But typically, you're not paying for the content. As you know, when you walk into a college class, there's all sorts of content costs, but you have to go to the bookstore and pay for really high book costs. And sometimes those are digital, sometimes they're printed, but they tend to be all rights reserved copyright. They're not usually CC licensed works. But if this NC licensed OER was in the course, that would be perfectly okay, even if they were charging tuition. What would not be okay with an NC licensed work is if you, the student, showed up at this training opportunity or this course on designing distance learning courses, and somebody said, yes, we've charged you tuition and we're charging you an instructional materials fee for this block of content. And if they were specifically charging for the content, then that would be violating NC. The same thing would go if this was staff at the university who were, you were designing distance learning courses to help them learn more about instructional design of online learning or whatever it is. If there was no fee being charged for the services, this is just staff professional development, obviously no problem. Even if it was a certificate that was being provided by the institution, that's really the same as tuition for a typical class. That's okay too. What's not okay would be to say, hey, we got this NC licensed content, we've made some revisions to it, and we're selling it. We're putting it on the web, or we're selling it for a profit to the bookstore. You can't sell the content itself. That would be violating NC. So Vicky says, student tuition is okay, thanks. What about executive education for professionals? Executive education for professionals is probably the same use case as tuition. The executives are paying tuition to come and get your executive MBA program or whatever it is. That's really, in the eyes of the law, that's really not any different. It really hinges on the use of the work itself and not on the user. So a lot of people get confused about this for non-commercial. Imagine, if you will, I don't know, Google is a for-profit entity, so Google's let's say Google took that NC licensed work and they wanted to use it inside Google for professional development. Can they do that? And the answer is sure. Whether or not the NC license is violated or not hinges on the use of the work, not on the user. So whether or not the user is Google or Creative Commons or, you know, Cardiff, it just doesn't matter who the user is. It's what they're doing with the work. And if their primary use of the work is commercial, meaning they're selling it somehow, then it violates the NC clause. If they're not, then they're okay. All right, Tim says, isn't the focus of this on the output produced, isn't the focus of this on the output produced having been through a course using NC resources? Once someone been through the course and they produce a distance learning course for the university that is sold, is that okay? Someone's been through the course, they produce a distance learning. Well, so I'm presuming, Tim, that the NC licensed OER that we're talking about was curriculum, instruction, professional development materials, something like that, that's training somebody or teaching somebody to do something, to have a new skill or a new competency. Building distance learning courses, for example, and then that person takes those new skills and goes and gets a job or does consulting or whatever. That's fine. That's a step removed from the resource. The question about whether or not you're violating NC with the resource itself is how you're using the resource itself. And if you're just using it and nobody's charging any money for it, that's fine. Again, charging tuition for a course where the resource is being used, that's okay. You can even sell the resource in the bookstore as long as it's only cost recovery. So I'm printing it, costs £5, I charge £5 for it, that's okay. What's not okay is to take that NC resource and to say to people when they show up to the training, you have to pay £100 to access this resource. That would be violating NC. Okay, I think we beat that one down. Other questions, and if they're good, not confused anymore, yay! So this is actually a really good point, though. You see how much time we've spent talking about and asking questions about non-commercial? So this happens all the time, and frankly, this is one of the reasons why a lot of people in education just stay away from non-commercial on education works, is because what we see at Creative Commons is the copyright holder. So if it's my work, if I built it, if I put an NC license on something, the copyright, what we see is copyright holders tend to be very permissive in what they're willing to let happen with their NC works, so they give a broad set of permissions, at least in their minds. And then what we see on the other end is that users, or the licensees of that work, are very careful and overly conservative. And so when people see an NC work, a lot of times they say, hey, I'm at a university, my university charges tuition, I'm not going to touch that with a 10-foot pole. And that's a real shame, because when I put the NC work, what I had in mind was I didn't want Pearson or Elsevier or McGraw-Hill or somebody to take that work, you know, sell it in their next textbook. But I'm happy to let, you know, Martin use it in his new position at Cambridge. And so what we see is there's a big gap between of use that's not being taken advantage of with NC works. And so a lot of educators just say, you know what, if it's that confusing, I'm just going to avoid it altogether. And they go the route that Martin went, where they said, you know, the point of this is sharing and really having people reuse my works to the extent they want to. I'm just going to avoid NC. Okay, other questions? And I might seed this with a new idea. All right.
Okay, but we had a question earlier about checking during the development phase and the licensing. Is an OER licensed with Creative Commons checked, whether the components are legally licensed too, or is that the author's job?
Yeah, good question. So, so it's always up to you. We don't check the licenses. There's no clearance process with Creative Commons. Creative Commons is not party to the license agreement between the licensor and the licensee. We just provide the licenses that the world uses. So if Martin was creating this big blob of a textbook down at the bottom of the page here, it's Martin's responsibility to make sure that everything is properly marked and that it's properly attributed and it's got the right license on it. So, for example, excuse me, my cats want in and out of my office. So Martin would need to say, okay, this Wikipedia article I want to use, what's the license, who's the author, what's the title, how do I get proper attribution? He needs to properly mark that. For him to include that in his work, those are legal requirements on Martin. And then Martin shares this new collection with the world, and other people can take it as it is, and they look at it and say, oh, I can see how everything is marked. And if they want to modify that work further, then they've got a responsibility to make sure that anything they add or revise is properly marked, etc. Now, if this ever went, you know, let's just say for the sake of argument that Martin made a mistake. So it was an honest mistake. He put this Wikipedia article in, and he accidentally marked it CC BY. And then somebody, you know, 5 steps down the road says, oh, this article's under CC BY. Well, let me just change it and, you know, modify it, and the Sharealike isn't on it. Well, if Wikipedia ever sued, and they could, my guess is they wouldn't, but if they did, you know, way down the road and said, hey, this is not CC BY, this is BY SA, and all these derivatives needed to be BY SA, then, you know, theoretically a judge or a court could trace, you know, go back and look at the chain and eventually see it, you know, came back to Martin, and Martin didn't mark it properly. But A, that doesn't happen. If you want to see all the court cases that have ever involved Creative Commons, just go to Google and type in Creative Commons case law, and you'll see there are only a few cases over the past decade, and every time CC licenses have gone to court around the world, they've been upheld by the judge. And things like this, like a small mistake like that Martin would have made, In the CC license themselves, there's a 30-day cure period, meaning if Martin made that mistake, he has 30 days from the time that he's notified of that mistake, by Wikipedia in this case, to fix it. And of course, Martin's going to say, oh gosh, you know, I'm really sorry, I know that it's by SA, I just screwed up because I was marking other stuff CC by. I'm really sorry, let me get that fixed right away. That's what actually happens in the world when mistakes are made. The other thing that happens is if Martin screwed up the marking on the Wikipedia article and shared his work out, somebody's going to see that, right? There's a lot of people in the world use Wikipedia, and they're going to say, hey, Martin, this is supposed to be by SA, and they're going to alert Martin. So this is the kind of positive community activities that take place when accidents happen. But honestly, they don't happen that often. Yeah, go ahead, Martin.
Yeah, so Julie has a follow-up question there. So I've gone through and I've checked all my materials that I'm included. Do I then need to keep going back to check that those materials are still correctly licensed? As in the source materials still have the same license that I originally thought they had.
This is a good question. Okay, so let's go back to this example, and then Peter, we'll get to CC0 next. So let's say that we're looking at this big blob on the screen. Martin produced this collection today, and he releases this collection out to the world and says, hey, unless otherwise marked, everything in this textbook I built is CC BY, and then he's marked other things appropriately. And let's say that 2 years from now, the Open Learn course that he is linked to has actually relicensed. So now it's not BY and CSA. Now it's CC BY. And Martin's question is, does he have to go back to that source material? Does he have to constantly go back and look to see if that Open Learn course he linked to is still under a BY and CSA license? And the answer is he doesn't. So this is a good thing. Creative Commons licenses are irrevocable. What that means is that they can never be taken back. So when Martin, at the moment in time when Martin took a copy of that Wikipedia article, a copy of that Open Learn course, he legally made a copy of those things under the terms of the license at that point in time. So when he took that Wikipedia article, it was by SA, I think they're at 4.0 now, I'd have to look. When he took the Open Learn OU course or part of the course, it was under a BY and CSA license. And he can use those works, a copy of those works, forever and until they go into the public domain under the terms of the license, and nobody can ever take that away from him. So that's a really important thing because, as Martin said, he doesn't want to every 6 months go back and check and make sure he's still got permissions to use these. He has permissions to use these forever under the terms of the license. Now, what Martin may want to do, because he thought this part of this Open Learn course was really great, it's in Martin's interest to maybe go back and look at that Open Learn course from time to time, because of course the Open University is going to continue to improve on it and change it and modify it, and Martin might want those new changes, and Open Learn might relicense the course under a different license in the future, but that's a different course. That's a different version of the course. And so in the end, Martin will make a choice. He'll say, well, I've got this version of the course under BY and CSA, which I really like, and their new version of the course 2 years later is under a CC BY license. Well, that's good. I like CC BY better than NCSA. It's less restrictive. But that new version of the course, gosh, I just don't like it as much. And so I'm not going to include it in my book. I'm going to stick with this old version I've got for now. And he can do that. He doesn't have to go back and ask permission. Does that help, Martin?
Yep, perfect, thanks.
And this is really important. Go ahead, James.
I was just going to say, I think we have time for one more slightly large question. Chris had typed in he's not so bothered about creating materials. He wants to be a consumer like most folks. I guess I want to hear about using Creative Commons licensed OER materials. Where do we find them and how do we rate them?
Oh, good questions. Okay, well let's take those one at a time. So one, what if you are producing content and you want to share your content as OER, or just more simply, you want to put a Creative Commons license on it, which if it's an educational resource, that'll make it OER, as long as it's not a no derivatives license, as we've said. So that's case one. What if I want to share my stuff? How do I share it? Where do I share it? And then point two, how do I find other people's stuff and use it and download it and make copies of it, etc. Okay, so let me grab some websites here and we'll go through these one at a time. Actually, I'm just going to screen share if that's okay. And then we'll share some links. All righty, let's see here. Okay, so the first link I'm going to give you is just our marking page. So this is if you click on that link, and we'll go through this a step at a time. When we say marking, what we mean are you're putting the license mark on something. So either you're marking your work with a CC license, or you're marking somebody else's work with the license they chose and giving them proper attribution. So if you look at this page, you'll see there's two options. One, mark your work with a CC license. That's I'm sharing my stuff. And the second link is provide attribution for works that you're using. So I'm giving proper attribution to somebody else's stuff. So let's do the we're sharing my stuff first. And let me do a screen share here. Application sharing. There we go. All right. All right. Can somebody type in the chat window? Can you see my screen, my marking screen up on Collaborate? Yes. Good. All right. So what I'm going to do first is how do we share our stuff? So the easiest thing to do is you go to creativecommons.org and you click on choose a license. So right in the middle of the page, you'll see this big green button that says choose a license. So first, before I get into this, let me say there are many platforms on the web, as we've discussed, Flickr, YouTube, many others, where the Creative Commons license chooser is embedded in the tool itself. So you can just, if you go to YouTube, you can just add a CC BY license to it. If you go to Flickr, they've got a license chooser embedded in the tool. Same thing with Blackboard or Desire to Learn, or I think Moodle even has that. So different tools that you're using on the web, you'll see the option to add a CC license. That's not true universally, but that's part of what we're trying to do, is to get CC woven into every technology out there that you might be using, so that you have a choice. As the author, if you choose to share your work, you can do so under the terms and conditions that you choose. Okay, well, let's say you've got a blog. So we were talking about blogs earlier, and you want to add a CC license to your blog, or this could be your textbook or whatever. So what you do is you come to the chooser, and you see that you've got these 4 quadrants. The upper left quadrant here is going to ask you 2 questions. Are you going to allow adaptations of your work to be shared? Yes, no, or yes as long as others share alike. You see in the upper right quadrant, as I'm answering these different questions, the license is changing. The second question is, are you going to allow commercial uses of your work? And if I say yes, it doesn't have a non-commercial restriction. If I say no, it does have non-commercial built into it. So I'm just going to leave these yes, and that'll give me a CC BY license or an attribution license. And then you saw how simple that was to choose the license you want. And then the only other thing that you'll want to do is in the lower left quadrant is what's the title of your work. So I'm going to call this Martin's textbook. You'll see in the lower right quadrant as I'm typing, it's actually putting all this metadata, this information, into the license itself. Attribute the work. We'll attribute this to Martin H, and the URL, HTTP, I don't know, we'll link it to CNN. Martin's Big Time. And so what you get over here in the lower right quadrant is it says it has all that information. Martin's textbook by Martin H. And this is linked to, of course, CNN.com, but we would have really linked to Martin's actual textbook, and the URL of that is licensed under a Creative Commons Attribution 4.0 international license. And then what you do is you just copy this code and you drop that into your blog. So those of you who use blogs or ever used HTML, you know about embed text, right? You can go to YouTube and get the embed text for a video. You can drop it into your learning management system or whatever web thing you're using, and it will display the YouTube video. This is exactly the same thing. You just drop the code in, and what it'll do is display the license. It'll give this machine-readable Creative Commons license. And the reason all this gobbledygook code is important is it lets machines on the web read the license. The reason that's important is, let me just show you. Here's one quick example. If you go to Google Advanced Search, and I type in, I don't know, algebra textbook, and then if I scroll to the bottom of all these fields I can filter by Google, you'll see the last one is called usage rights, and I can actually filter by license. And so what this is doing, what Google is doing, is it's looking for CC licensed works on the web and things that are in the public domain. And so here's a free linear algebra textbook at St. Michael's College, and if I click on that, sure enough, I see that this is under a Creative Commons Attribution Sharealike license. Okay, so that's how you, those are a couple ways to add a CC license to your work. You go to the chooser, choose your license, put in the metadata, copy that code, stick it on your blog, stick it on your website, and you're good to go. That's all you have to do. And by the way, we don't keep a registry on this. This is just a tool. It doesn't log anything, so none of your privacy or anything like that are being violated. We don't collect information from you. There's no cost. We don't ask for personal information. As you can see, it's just there. So there you go. That's how you add a license or use a tool that's on the web. So now let's look at how do you find other people's works. So I'll ask Martin and James and others to just start dropping links in. So Martin, maybe you could drop in Joram just to kick that off, and let me share a few links as well. So here's one that I'll demo here. This is called Openforus.org. So this is a site that we built for the biggest OER project on the planet right now. It's a $2 billion, that's billion with a B, $2 billion U.S. project from the U.S. Department of Labor to build new academic programs in the United States. And all of the content that's being built must, as a requirement of the grant, be licensed under a Creative Commons Attribution license. So this is pretty cool, right? You can take, anybody in the world can take all of this content for free under a CC BY license. Anyway, we're working with these folks, all these community colleges in the United States. We're building all this stuff. And they asked us, gosh, what is OER? And most importantly, how do we find stuff? So make this a little bit bigger here. You'll see on the screen it says, well, what are you looking for? Do you want a general search of OER? Are you looking for photos or images? Do you want video? Do you want audio or music? General education? Is it an open textbook you're looking for? Simulations maybe? And so I say, oh yeah, simulations. I'm in biology and I want biology simulations. So fine, click on that. It'll take you down and it'll say, oh, if you want the best simulations on the planet, you want to go to PhET. So this happens to be a project, and I'll go ahead and click through to PhET here. This is a project at the University of Colorado Boulder, and if I click on Play with the Sims, I said I was in biology, so they've got physics, biology, chemistry, earth science, etc. Well, I'm going to go with biology, and I'm going to scroll down here and say, ooh, that's exactly what I needed. I need molecule polarity. That's what I'm teaching this week. And you'll see that here's molecule polarity. Now and these sims are really great. They've got variables that the students can adjust, and you can run the sims in real time when they move, and they're all in Java right now. They're rewriting everything in HTML5, so they work on all the latest devices. Really, really cool stuff. These sims are actually so good that Pearson takes all these SIMs and uses them in their textbooks because they're better than what Pearson had been producing themselves. What's great is that all these SIMs are dual licensed both under a Creative Commons attribution license. You can take it under the terms of a CC BY license, and you can take it under GPL if you want access to the software. And I scroll down to the bottom of the page here, you'll see because these SIMs are openly licensed, they're actually being translated. So here they are. This particular SIM is in Arabic, Basque, Bosnian, Brazilian Portuguese, German, Greek, Hebrew, Hungarian, Indonesian. I mean, it's just awesome, right? You openly license your stuff, and other people will take it and translate it, make it better, etc. So that's one website, openforus.org, that includes Merlot and OER Commons and Jorum. I think we've got Jorum on there. And just sites from all around the world in different categories. What we've tried to do is kind of make it a one-stop shop for, hey, if you're looking for OER, here's a good place to come. And then let's go back to the marking page just to wrap this up to see what do we do. CC marking. So once you find something, let me go back. I'm going to say provide attribution to works that you use. And let me go ahead and just drop this link in the chat window so you can go directly to it. So everybody click on that link, or you can just look at my screen. That's fine too. So this tells you once I downloaded that PhET simulation, or once I took that course from the Open University, or once I took that physics module from MIT, how do I give proper attribution? How does Martin include that in his new course that he's building? So we walk you through it. We say, well, here are the best practices. And we say, so for example, here's an image. This happened to be an image that was taken at the CC 10th birthday party. Make this a little bit bigger. And you can see, we say, this is an ideal attribution. So Creative Commons 10th birthday celebration San Francisco, that's the title of the image. It's by Tim Vollmer is a guy who works at Creative Commons. He's the author of it, so it's by him. He's the author. Is licensed under a CC BY 2.0 license. You see these things are hyperlinked, right? So first, if I click on this one, that's going to take me to the actual, oops, did it take me to the actual image? It should. Let me try that again. Yeah, there we go. So it takes me to the actual image in Flickr. And that's good because to give proper attribution, I need to link back to the original work. Now let me go back again, and this time I'm going to click on the author. I'm going to click on Tim. Well, Tim wants you to go to his main page on Flickr because, as you can see, Tim likes to cook and make iced coffee and all sorts of cool stuff. And so Tim says, well, here, you know, if you're using my images, then here's the rest of my images. He puts all his images under CC BY. And then the last thing that's linked here is the license itself. And if you click on that, it's going to take you to the human readable deed of the Creative Commons license. And it says you are free to do these things under the following conditions. So as you can see in that attribution, what we've done, and this is the best practice, is we've provided title. Whoops, here we go. We've provided title, author, source, or the URL, and what's the license. And if you provide those four things in your attribution, you're good to go. We've sought to simplify that even more with Creative Commons 4.0, the new licenses that just came out, where somebody can provide proper attribution just by linking back to the work if all of this information is on the work itself. That's sufficient attribution. But best practice and to be safe, we still recommend that you do this. Just what's the title of the work, who's the author, link to it, and what's the license. As you can see, very simple to do, doesn't take a lot of time. It also is just, it's respectful, right? If I'm going to use somebody's work, I need to give proper attribution to them. Tim was kind enough to share his image with us. The Open University was kind enough and generous enough to share their course. CK12 was kind enough to share that textbook. Let me give you one more, Jim, before we leave. I know we're out of time. If you haven't seen OpenStax yet, you'll want to take a look at this. Here's the link. These are textbooks. They are all CC BY licensed, and they're designed to be for your highest enrolled courses. And so if any of you are students and you've had the experience of buying expensive textbooks, you'll want to share OpenStax with your next professors so that maybe they'll use one of those high-quality textbooks instead of charging you 150 pounds for your next book.
Cable, thank you so much for an extremely engaging session today, and thank you for starting your day with us. Most of our participants are in the UK and Europe, and they're closing out their workday with the ocTEL session. So everybody, if you would please join me in giving Cable a round of virtual applause. If there are any further questions that we didn't get to during today's session, please use the forums, use the communities, use Twitter. We'll try and address all the questions that we get. And just a reminder, we're in the middle of week 3 here on Wednesday. Next week is an off week, a break week, or a catch-up week, depending on your point of view. And ocTEL week 4 will resume on the week of May 2nd. So once again, Cable, thank you so much. And for everybody in today's session with ocTEL, have a great evening and the rest of your day.